Psalm chapter 51 verse 9 says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." David's prayer in this passage is a plea for God's mercy and forgiveness. It is traditionally believed that this psalm was written by David after the prophet Nathan confronted him about his sins with Bathsheba and Uriah. He acknowledges his sins and asks God to turn away from them, to forgive and remove his iniquities. David recognizes the need for a transformation of his inner being and seeks a clean heart and a renewed spirit from God. David prays like this because he realizes the gravity of his sins and the need for reconciliation with God. He acknowledges that he has fallen short, and he deeply desires to restore his relationship with the Lord. David humbly confesses his wrongdoing and expresses his longing for God's forgiveness and cleansing. Psalm chapter 23 verse 1 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." David prays like this because he recognizes God as his shepherd and acknowledges his dependence on God's guidance, provision, and care. The prayer reflects David's trust in God's ability to meet his needs and lead him in paths of righteousness. The passage highlights David's deep reliance on God's guidance and provision. He acknowledges that God, as his shepherd, provides nourishment and rest in green pastures and beside still waters. David's prayer expresses his gratitude for God's restoration of his soul and his trust in God's leading towards righteousness. The psalm as a whole conveys a sense of trust, contentment, and assurance in God's shepherding presence. It suggests that through his trust in God and reliance on his guidance, David experiences peace, restoration, and the leading towards righteousness. Psalm chapter 27 verse 1 says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" David prays like this because he has a deep and unwavering trust in God's presence and power. He affirms that the Lord is his light and salvation, meaning that God illuminates his path and provides deliverance from any form of danger or threat. David's prayer reflects his confidence that with God as the stronghold of his life, there is no need to fear anyone or anything. The passage conveys David's unwavering faith in God's protection and his trust that God will be his source of strength and security. David's prayer demonstrates his reliance on God's power and his belief that with God by his side, he can face any challenge without fear. Psalm chapter 139 verse 23 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." He recognizes the importance of inviting God to search his heart, thoughts, and actions. David desires to align himself with God's will, asking God to reveal any sinful or harmful tendencies within him. He seeks divine guidance to lead him in the path of righteousness and the everlasting way. David prays like this because he understands the significance of a genuine and honest relationship with God. He recognizes his own limitations and the potential for sin in his life. David desires to live a life pleasing to God, acknowledging that only God can fully know and understand his heart. His prayer demonstrates his humility, openness, and willingness to surrender to God's refining work. Psalm chapter 3 verse 3 says, "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head." David prays like this because he finds himself in a challenging and perilous situation where people around him are doubting his well-being and questioning whether God will save him. Despite the negative opinions and doubts of others, David turns to God in prayer with a deep trust and confidence in his protection and deliverance. David's prayer expresses his unwavering faith in God's ability to shield and defend him. He acknowledges God as his source of glory and the one who lifts him up, giving him confidence and encouragement even in the midst of adversity. David seeks reassurance and strength from God, knowing that he alone can provide salvation and deliverance. Psalm chapter 16 verse 8 says, "I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken." David prays like this because he has a deep and unwavering trust in God's presence and guidance. He acknowledges that he keeps the Lord continually before him, recognizing that God is by his side, providing support and stability. David's prayer expresses his confidence in God's faithfulness and protection, leading to gladness and joy in his heart. The passage reflects David's devotion and commitment to keep God at the center of his life. He seeks a close relationship with God, knowing that his presence brings security and peace. David's prayer demonstrates his reliance on God's strength and his belief that with God by his side, he can face any challenge without being shaken. Psalm chapter 91 verses 1-2 says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." David prays like this because he recognizes the importance of seeking refuge and finding shelter in the Most High, who he refers to as the Almighty. He expresses his trust in God as his refuge, fortress, and source of security. David's prayer reflects his unwavering faith in God's ability to deliver him from various dangers and traps. The passage conveys David's confidence in God's protection and deliverance. He acknowledges that those who dwell in God's shelter, placing their trust in him, will find refuge and safety. David's prayer demonstrates his reliance on God's power and his belief that God can rescue him from any perilous situation.